Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. A great Friday to you all, and believe me, we have a great Friday afternoon scheduled for you right here on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. And believe me, we are going to talk Carolina Panthers. Believe me, we're not going to start with Carolina Panthers, but we have a lot to do. We're going to have Brian Batko, who covers the Steelers at PGSportsNow. We're going to have him on in the second segment. Then we're going to have the great legendary running back, Chuck Foreman from the Minnesota Vikings on with us. So great show. Stay tuned. Go ahead and buckle up because we got a lot for you. But before getting into the Panthers, which once again we will talk a lot about, I want to talk quickly about ACC basketball because we've been leaving it out the last couple of weeks because we've had so much to talk about. But when you look at the ACC men's basketball, I'll tell you what, everybody's talking about Virginia. They're 8-0. They're great. They're good. They're not great. They're a team that plays great defense and doesn't turn over the ball. They don't score a lot, but I think they're going to get beat up here a little bit. They play Houston tomorrow, the number 5 team in the country. They'll probably lose. That's what I'm thinking. And they play a tough game coming up Tuesday versus Miami, which they can very well lose. But talking about Miami has a good little solid team in basketball in the ACC. They got the trio of Wong, Miller, and Pack at the guards, and they rebound well with O'Meara. But Miami is just an average team. They don't have a lot of depth. Then you move into 2 teams that we're very familiar with. Okay, I'm not sold on Wake Forest. I'm not sold on NC State. You know what? I'm not sold on Duke either. Yes, they are 10-2, but they can't hit a damn outside shot. Whether it's a 3-point shot or a 2-point shot inside, they cannot hit a shot. Okay, they turn over the ball, 11 times a game, and they're so inconsistent. I'll tell you what, I like Filipowski. I really do. What's he averaging? Like 14 points a game, 9 rebounds a game. But you know what? I'm very disappointed at what Jeremy Roach. Jeremy Roach has not really stepped up this year. He's been impressive one game, maybe impressive another game where he scores 20 points, but he's so inconsistent. And the problem with this Duke team, folks, there is no depth. No depth on this team, which is going to hurt them now that ACC play has started. The other thing is they've had all this time off, and I know it's finals. How much is that going to affect them when they play? I believe they play, it might be Wake Forest coming up, an ACC play coming up, I believe, Tuesday as well. Don't quote me on that, but how much is that going to affect them? But I don't see Duke being a powerhouse in the ACC. Now, the one team that everybody has sold out on is the North Carolina Tar Heels. And when you look at this North Carolina Tar Heels team, I watched them the other night, Tuesday night versus Citadel, just blowing them out, which they should have. But it wasn't the blowout that impressed me. They finally hit that 3-point shot. The inability to hit the 3-point shot this year has cost them tremendously because with Love and Davis and some of these other guys out there like Nichols, they expect to hit the 3-point shot. And what happens when they don't? They end up losing. The other thing, on that night, they were hitting those shots. They were hitting 3-pointers. And people go, well, Larry, they're playing Citadel. Doesn't matter. You either hit a shot or you miss a shot. It don't matter who you're playing. The other part is they weren't moving the ball around the first however many games, the first 10 games of the season. They weren't passing the ball to the open guy. They were taking shots they shouldn't have took. Citadel, 24 assists they had in that game, whereas they were only averaging 11 assists before. And you know what I do, folks, when I look at this and I see the inability to hit 3-pointers and I see the inability to pass the ball around, it questions what the coach is doing during practices to prepare this team. Okay, you have to prepare this team, the way they are going to be defended and pushed upon and, beat up in practice, just like they will be the game. And that could have been the problem. Very impressed with what they did. But the other thing that impresses me about this team, and I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it now, folks, and I'm going to shock some people. I still think this team has the team to be the best, not just in the ACC, but of all college basketball. There is no other team in college basketball, no other team, not Houston, not Virginia, whoever, not Gonzaga, and keep going and keep going, not Alabama, okay, who is playing great. There is no other team that has the depth that this North Carolina Tar Heel team has. Listen to this. Caleb Love, Armando Bacot, R.J. Davis, Peter Nance, who has been phenomenal, Leaky Black, Puff Johnson, Seth Trimble, Tyler Nichols, Jalen Washington, who showed us the other night that he could be a stud. This team is a very, very, very good basketball team, and I would not be surprised if by end of the year, remember, this happened last year. Everybody was calling for Hubert Davis to be fired. Get rid of him. Then he goes to the national championship. This team is going to do that again. They're going to go on a streak. I don't know when it's going to be, folks. Last year, it wasn't until the last quarter of the season. I'd like to see them do it a little bit earlier than that. But this team is by far, on paper, they are by far one of the best teams in college basketball. But at the end of the day, doesn't matter what you are on paper. It's what the paper does, what you take from that paper, and how you execute it on the court. And my belief, watch out for these Tar Heels. I'm telling you now, it's just going to take some consistency passing that ball around and getting that nice three-point shot that they love so much, and keep feeding the Peter Nance underneath and Armando Bacot, who's a force. And this team by far could be the best team in all of college basketball. All right, let's talk about those Panthers, folks. How about those Panthers? How does this sound, folks? You beat the Steelers. The Buccaneers play the 49ers. The Buccaneers very well could lose this game to the 49ers, who are just unbelievable right now. What would that mean? That means your Panthers are in first place, baby. That's right. First place. But don't worry about everybody else, I keep saying. Worry about what's at hand for you. And that is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I don't understand this, folks. I'm listening to the media. I'm listening, and I take what I hear from the media with a grain of salt, but they actually think the Steelers are a better team than the Panthers. How the heck can you think that the Steelers are a better team? They have no offensive line. They have no defensive line. Now, I will tell you something, folks. This Steelers team do have playmakers. They do. On the offensive side of the football, we don't know if Pickett's playing. But on the offense, they still have Harris. They still have Pickens. They still have Johnson. They still have Freiermuth, who are very effective players. And defense, they got a lot of big names. They got Miles Jacks, Cameron Haywood, Micah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt. They got Highsmith, who has 10 sacks this year. So they do have players. But where this team is going to prevail this weekend is our Carolina Panthers should be able to run the ball up and down the field. This is a Steelers team that gave up, a bunch of yards to the Ravens, over 200 yards rushing, and 154 to the Falcons. Meanwhile, your Carolina Panthers last week went ahead and rushed over 200 yards versus Seattle Seahawks, who I believe is a much better team than the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I'll tell you what, when you look at this game, and I say we shouldn't only be able to feast offensively, and our offensive line shouldn't just be able to do a great job, but our defensive line should be feasting on their quarterback. Wow, wow, wow. One of the worst offensive lines in all of football is the Pittsburgh Steelers. In the last 13 games, Pickett was sacked 24 times. 24 times. And you look at that Seattle game, what was so impressive. What did I say right here on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. I said if you want to beat Seattle, you have to convert on third down. 6 of 13 on third downs, 1 of 2 on fourth down. That's not too shabby, baby. And then I said you got to win the time of possession battle. Time of possession battle. I see if I have it here. I think we had 39 minutes to 20 minutes that Seattle had. What happens? It goes hand in hand. You keep your defense off the field. You keep them fresh, like I've been saying all year long. They will respond. This is a top 10 defense, and they've been proving it the last 3 or 4 games. And they will prove it again versus the Steelers. Every side of the football. I don't think this game should even be close. I don't think it should be close. I think the Panthers, this is a game they should win, and they have to win. That's my belief. Meanwhile, what can you say about Sam Darnold? No turnovers. You won the turnover battle versus Seattle, 2-0. You should win the battle again. Excuse me, folks. You should win the battle again. He targeted 10 different receivers last week, hit 7 of them. And then you look at the trio, Blackshear, Chuba Hubbard, Foreman. The 3 running backs were up and down the field. What a beautiful, beautiful game plan. And I really, really believe that this Panthers team should not just win this game, but they should win the game convincingly. Say what you want. Yes, they're favored by 2.5. Yes, we have to pack the house at the bank this weekend. You fans listening, don't just listen to my show. Don't just root for the Panthers. Get out there, support your team. We have to have more Panther fans in the stands than Steeler fans. Come on, I know what's around that town, okay? I know how Charlotte is. There is no excuse and no reason why we can't pack the house for a team that could be in first place by Sunday evening. First place. What have I been saying? One game at a time. Don't look ahead. Don't look back. Look at the game at hand, and we will be successful. But every aspect of this game, folks, we should be able to win if we play Carolina Panther football. Run hard, run first, open up that play option with Sam Darnold, win the third down battle, win the turnover battles, and you know what? You'll win the football game too. All right, folks, we're not done talking Panthers Steelers. When we come back, right after this commercial break, we will have Brian Batko, who covers the Pittsburgh Steelers at PG Sports Now. We'll be back right after this message. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. Whoa, what a show we've had. We've been talking about the Panthers and the success they've been having the last couple of weeks. Tough matchup, like I said, versus the Pittsburgh Steelers coming up this weekend. And it is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to have on the WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com hotline. Let's welcome in Brian Batko, who covers the Pittsburgh Steelers at PG Sports Now. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
Brian, thanks so very, very much for coming on. And I guess the question of the week has to be, and I guess it's still uncertain, what are you hearing about the progress of Kenny Pickett, and what is your opinion of whether he will go or will not go this weekend?
Yeah, I can't imagine he's going to go. Second concussion in the last 2 months for him. The last time around when he went down against Tampa Bay, he was actually able to clear the protocol really quickly, was back in practice that following Wednesday and played in Miami the following Sunday. But I think that's a tough sell now when you're trying to protect anybody, but especially a first-round pick, especially a rookie, especially a quarterback behind an offensive line that has gotten him hit and knocked out of the game on a couple occasions. So I think it's going to be Mitch Trubisky or Mason Rudolph, a couple guys with Carolina ties.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you've had an opportunity now to watch Pickett throughout the year. First year, rookie, obviously doesn't have a strong offensive line like you have mentioned. What is your assessment? He has 4 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. What's your assessment of what you've seen from this kid so far this year?
He's been a little bit better than those numbers. Yeah, Larry. I mean, it was moving pretty fast for him early on. He got thrown into the fire after really not getting any first-team reps at all for the first 4 weeks of the season when Mitch Trubisky was starting. And then Mike Tomlin decided, he'd seen enough. It was time to turn the page, move on to Pickett. And, since then, I wouldn't say his progress has been linear, but ever since the bye week, he's really been taking care of the football, hasn't thrown an interception in 4 games. And, we didn't get a chance to see if that streak would have reached 5 against the Ravens because he was gone in the second series with that concussion. But I think he's showing some things that you want to see. The decision-making getting better, the pocket feel getting better. It remains to be seen whether he kind of has the big-time upside, the arm talent that is, worthy of a franchise quarterback. But that was also the question with him coming out of the draft. So I know the Panthers did their due diligence on him coming out of Pitt, and then he lands right next door with the Steelers. So we'll see. Hopefully he'll get a chance to get healthy here. And at this point, even if the Steelers are out of it in the AFC, any reps will be valuable reps for him down the stretch going into year 2.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We're talking to Brian Batko, covers the Pittsburgh Steelers at PGSportsNow. You look at this Steelers team, and I tell people, and I've got to watch a few of their games this year, the record is 5-8, but when you look at this team and the games they played, and maybe with the exceptions of the Bills and Eagles game, they've been in every single game this year.
Yeah, and that's been the case with them really for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, you think back before Ben Roethlisberger's elbow injury in 2019, they had Antonio Brown, they had an experienced offensive line. I mean, that's when they could really put it on some people with that offense. Ever since Ben's injury, he wasn't the same. They've been in a lot of close games. Their defense has ascended, and they've slammed the door shut on some opponents in that span. But the last couple of seasons, especially last year before Ben retired, his final season in the NFL, I mean, they just got a lot of clutch throws out of him, and that's why they were able to win so many one-possession games. And you probably attribute a lot of that to Mike Tomlin being the second most experienced head coach in the NFL. This year, different team, younger team, especially on the offensive side of the ball and at quarterback specifically. They haven't made as many of those winning plays. The luck has turned on them a little bit, and they haven't gotten the right bounces. So we know how thin the line is in the NFL, right? Especially this year, parity at an all-time high. So you can point to plays here or there that if they go the other way, the Steelers have a much different record. But they are what they are. They're 5-8, and it looks like they're going to miss the playoffs for the first time in 3 years.
Yeah, the weird thing about this team, or maybe ironic thing, is you look at this team, and they have a lot of pieces. Obviously, the quarterback is still up for grabs as far as what Pickett will become as he learns more. But you have Harris in the backfield. You have Pickens and Johnson outside. I love this tight end, or however you pronounce his name, Fryermuth. Right, that you have. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball. You got Miles Jacks. You got Haywood. You got Fitzpatrick. You got Watt. Highsmith is having He has 10 sacks this year. Let me ask you this, Brian. Looking at this team, is it safe to say that this team is trenches away from maybe being a competitive team?
I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, they need to shore up the offensive and defensive lines. The Ravens showed them that in no uncertain terms on Sunday, pushing them around 220 rush yards to I think 65 for the Steelers. So it was not even close on the line of scrimmage. But they've got some other issues to address too. I mean, the secondary has kind of been a weak link for them at times this year. They need a shutdown corner. They haven't had that since Joe Hayden retired after last season. He was a coup for them coming over from the Browns, really stabilized things at that spot. The wide receiver position has been, I think, good but not great. It leaves you wanting at times with the inconsistency. And even, people were down on Najee Harris early this year. He's been running a lot harder lately, and I think you'll see that Sunday in Carolina. But he was a little tentative early this season. People wondering, did the Steelers make a mistake investing a first-round pick in a running back? So they've got some things that they need to fix this offseason. But, I mean, hey, going back to where we started, right, it always begins and ends with the quarterback. You need that alpha at that position if you're going to reach the highest heights of this league. And they have to hope that guy is Kenny Pickett, even if this is something of a lost season, maybe even Mike Tomlin's first losing season. They'd have to win out at this point to avoid that. If Kenny Pickett shows you something that gives you encouragement for year two, then you feel like 2022 was a success to some extent.
Before we get to the game that's coming up this weekend, let me ask you a simple question. Will Mike Tomlin be the head coach of this team next year?
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. I mean, you've got to give the guy some runway post Ben Roethlisberger. There are plenty of people here in Pittsburgh, Larry, let me tell you, who say a lot of his success now we're seeing was because of the quarterback and not because of his own head coaching ability. And you know what? Maybe there is some truth to that. I think quarterback is the most important thing for any franchise in this league. I mean, look at what Bill Belichick has done with the Patriots since Tom Brady left. Not a lot, but I think the Steelers, more than any organization, they value stability, continuity. They've had 3 head coaches since 1969. I don't think Tomlin's going anywhere. If he did, I think that would be his decision, and I don't think he's ready to do that. The guy's still a football junkie. He'll be in the seat next season, but they've got to start having some postseason success.
We're talking to Brian Batko, covers the Pittsburgh Steelers at PG Sports Now. He's on the WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road SportsRadio.com hotline. You talked about Pickett or quarterback position getting sacked. I think Pickett has been sacked 24 times in 13 games this year. You're going up against a team that is just starting to gel under interim coach Steve Wilks. Unbelievable defense. How do you stop this defensive rush of the Carolina Panthers?
That's what they're trying to figure out at Steelers headquarters this week. That was where Mike Tomlin started with his synopsis of the Panthers Tuesday at his weekly press conference. I think he led off with Brian Burns and how he's seen him grow into such a ferocious pass rusher. And the Steelers' offensive line is still very much in transition. You would know better than me, Larry. Is he more right side or left side, or do they move him around?
He's all over the place.
Okay, yeah. So that's gonna be tricky then when the Steelers' second-year left tackle Dan Moore, who's been he's been overwhelmed at times in his career. He was only a 4th rounder. He wasn't supposed to start right away, but injuries happened, and there he was last season, and they've kind of stuck by him. But that could be a winning edge there for the Panthers. Brian Burns, against the left side of the Steelers line, they're going to need to chip and add some protection, of course. So, they've gelled at times, but I think they're better in the run game than they are in pass pro. So that's the identity right now for the Panthers, and that's kind of what the Steelers want their formula to be. So could be yet another slugfest in this one, much like Steelers-Ravens was last week. Yeah,
and you talk about the running. One thing, the last 2 games, the Steelers, I think, versus the Ravens, gave up 215 yards rushing. The Falcons, they gave up, I think, 154. I'm just throwing it out. I don't know how accurate those are, but they're pretty Yeah, they're pretty accurate. You're going up against a team, you talked about an identity where Steve Wilkes has turned this identity around and pretty much went back to old school football where you pound that rock and you rush. And rushing is what they've been doing, averaging over 200 yards the last 3 games rushing. How difficult is, and it's not just one running back, Brian, it's Foreman, it's Hubbard, it's Brashear. I mean, how do you stop this running game attack of Carolina?
Well, the Steelers do have to go back to the drawing board. They've got a gut check time after letting the Ravens do that to them. I mean, that's traditionally one of the best running attacks in the league year in and year out. So maybe you can lean on that and just say it was a bad day for us. But Cam Hayward, I think, is going to grab some guys by the lapels this week and make sure they're on their P's and Q's. So, I mean, I do still think that this run defense can be and is better than what we saw against Baltimore, even a Lamar Jackson-less Baltimore. But we know what the Panthers are going to try to do. I'm sure Mike Tomlin and his DC, Terrell Austin, and Brian Flores on the defensive staff, make Sam Darnold beat you, smash the run first, and see if he can go up top on you and take the top off the defense. So, I think the Steelers can do that. I think they can get back to suffocating the run game. But the other interesting twist here on this part of the matchup is Steelers' offensive line coach is Pat Meyer. So he should know some of these guys from the Panthers and some of their schemes up front. I know that it's a new regime now with Steve Wilkes, but Pat Meyer very familiar with the personnel over there with the Panthers in his first season now as the Steelers O-line coach. Maybe he will have some insights that can help against the Panthers run game.
Before I let you run, Brian, in your opinion, and we hit on some of them, but what is the number one key in order for the Steelers to prevail in this game?
I think taking care of the football. I believe they are undefeated this year when they win the turnover battle, and that's not rocket science. That's pretty much every team in the NFL, unless you're the Chiefs or the Bills, right? And you can turn the ball over; it doesn't matter because Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, they'll get you back next time. But the Steelers don't have that kind of margin for error. We saw it last week when Mitch Trubisky threw 3 interceptions. They just can't do that and still grind out wins. So if they win the turnover battle, I think they win this game. That's the biggest factor for me, and we'll see what happens. It is very intriguing that I think on paper maybe the Steelers are the better team, but we know the Panthers have a lot more to play for right now than a group that pretty much had their playoff hopes dashed last week.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, I want to thank you so very, very much taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina.
No problem, Larry. Enjoy the game, man.
All right, you too. All right, that was Brian Batko of PG Sports Now. Sorry, folks, I lost my place there. Of PG Sports Now. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, oh, baby, we're going to be joined by a legendary running back of the Minnesota Vikings, Chuck Foreman. We'll be right back after these messages. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. And boy, what a show we've had so far. We broke down the game coming up this week. Huge game between the Carolina Panthers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you talk about championships and you talk about great running backs, and we talked about the great running game of the Carolina Panthers and how great it's been. My next guest, I'll tell you what, is incredible. Incredible guest, played in the 70s, was one of the best running backs of his era. It is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to introduce to you on the WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com hotline. Let's welcome in legendary running back of the Minnesota Vikings, Chuck Foreman. Chuck, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. It's fine. It's getting cold up here, but snow's coming, but I'm good.
Well, good. You got to stay safe up there. And, we'll talk about cold in a minute. It's funny you mentioned that because it's definitely a topic I want to hit on with you today. But, one of the things, Chuck, that you were known for in your career was not just running the football and being able to spin all over the place and break tackles, but you were also known for receiving the football out of the backfield. I wanted to always ask you, if you had an option, okay, which did you prefer or which did you enjoy more? Getting the ball handed off to you and running with it, or going out for a pass and catching it?
Well, actually, for me in my time, man, I was just playing football. That was just part of the game. I just had to be good at everything. I never really separated, running or receiving the football. I think when I got here to Minnesota, even though at the University of Miami, I played many positions, running back, cornerback, wide receiver. I think that, developed most of my skills down there. But when I got to Minnesota, they asked me which position did I want to play, running back, wide receiver, or corner. So that's how it happened. And I just happened to be blessed to be able to do both. And they created an offense here in Minnesota. We used to call it the Purple Offense, which San Francisco called the West Coast offense.
Right.
But that was our offense. And they kind of took it and ran with it and got all the credit for what we created.
Yeah, Chuck, talk about the era of quarterbacks that you played, that were your peers basically in the National Football League. When you look at the National Football League back then in the 70s, you had O.J. Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, Franco Harris, Larry Zonka, Walter Payton, one of my good buddies, Lawrence McCutcheon, and Lydell Mitchell, just to name a few. There was a big difference back in the game you played where it was run-first offense, where today's game is more of a pass-first offense.
Exactly, and it was run dominant for sure back in those days. You were credited with your yards from scrimmage. For me, that was a problem because I got yards from scrimmage and receiving the ball. But we had a lot of great players, and it was, like I said, it was run dominant, and those were all great players. And today's game, at least the runner receiver is getting the recognition he certainly deserved.
Now, what was it like? For those that don't remember, the Vikings used to play outdoors in the elements that he was just telling you about. Chuck was telling you about how it's about to get cold there, but there was nothing like playing in Metropolitan Stadium. Do you think that was more of an advantage for the Vikings because of a lot of you guys living there, or was it a disadvantage having to play so much? And what was it like playing in those frigid temperatures?
I thought it was an advantage for sure. Generally when we got to playoff time, which was when the cold weather was setting in, we were playing against the LA Rams for the most part. And when we had them here, I thought that was an advantage because when that sun set behind that stadium, it dropped like 20, 30, 40 degrees. And, it was difficult to play in that weather. And if it snowed, it was even more difficult. So it was an advantage for sure.
Now, you went to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, you didn't win, but you went there 3 times. It's every NFL player's dream to get to the Super Bowl and obviously win the Super Bowl. Despite winning, talk about the fulfillment of at least getting to the Super Bowl, not just once, but 3 times.
Well, I think the challenge and the excitement, don't misunderstand me, the game itself was great. But the challenge was to get there, and the things that you had to do to maintain that level of performance the commitment, everybody being on the same page. And I think one of the things that motivated us, especially when I got here, this team was pretty solid. You know, they had a very veteran team, and they emphasized the fact that, okay, you play during the season and you play to pay your bills. When you play in the playoffs, you play in to save your money. So, you know, even though there wasn't a lot of money in the playoffs in my time, you know, when you made an extra $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, that was big to put away. You know, that was one of the motivating factors in my era, to maintain and commit to being all you can be every game and to concentrate on everything you have to do. Mistake-free football, you know, doing what you. I mean, they really, really, really emphasized all that. And if you were a guy that made mistakes, then you weren't on our team. You know, that was just the way it went. So that's the key to, you know, to me anyway, from my own personal experience, to get into the playoffs and doing well. And then it all starts this time of year because you got to get playoff ready.
Yeah, no doubt about that. When you look back at your career, Chuck, do you have any regrets, or what is your biggest regret that you can think of?
Well, I don't think I have any. I mean, other than winning a Super Bowl, been there 3 times, never won one. I think that was tough to swallow for quite a while, as a matter of fact. And I guess I did have a little depression after the last one, no question about it. But all in all, I can't complain, and I played for a great organization and had a lot of great people that I played with, and I can only say it was a great experience for me.
Well, I want to talk about those plays. I want to start off first with the coach, okay, before we get to the plays. Talk about Bud Grant and the influence he had on you as a player and as a person.
Well, my parents had an influence on me as a person. Bud Grant had nothing to do with that, but he was a really good football coach. He was a disciplinarian. As a football coach, he expected you to come take responsibility for your being in shape plays. I mean, all the things I was saying to you, he was definitely a great leader from that aspect, and to show you what it takes to win. But as far as my person goes, my parents are responsible for the person that I am.
Now, I want to talk about some of the players. Let's start out with Fran Tarkenton. You lined up behind him, obviously, most of your career. What good, for those people that never got to see Fran Tarkenton, how good of a quarterback was Fran Tarkenton?
Fran was an exceptional quarterback, no question. I think he was here once. He was here. I think the Vikings drafted him, then they traded him to the Giants. You know, back in his time, you know, the drop back passer was, in fact, the only way they wanted to go. I think Fran was the only quarterback that could move around, scramble, get away, make plays. And I think at the time, I think it was Norm Van Brockman, you know, traded him to New York because he didn't like that type of player. But Fran revolutionized, in my opinion anyway, the way his position was played, because it was back then when I played that other than Fran that could were that athletic and were smart, and you know, I mean, all the things that you need to be with the ability to move around. And then you got to remember also, back in that time, you know, they didn't have people. You didn't have earpieces in your helmet with coaches calling your plays for you. You know, you had to retain down distance situations. All, you know, that's what the quarterback to retain all that and share it with us. So it's a big difference when you compare quarterbacks. That's why I don't believe in that word GOAT. I believe that you can be the best of your time, but you can't be the best of all time.
Right, because eras are different. I mean, it's like in any sport. And because I always said, and it's funny you said that. I was having this debate the other day with one of the guys, and I said, no disrespect towards the quarterbacks today, but to the point you were making, you had to be a little bit smarter and more intelligent back in your era because of the lack of technology.
Well, the lack of technology. I mean, I think any quarterback got to stay smart for the most part. But I'm just saying, with the lack of technology, they definitely had to retain everything that in meetings. When they met, they had more meetings than us probably because they had to go over and over and over the game plan, down distance, all the things that we do too. And as a running back, you got to know all that. You got to look at defenses, being able to read, coming out of the backfield, reading the defense, reading linebackers, which way to go when they were moving different ways. So it's all, it's all relevant to the success of a football team. But for quarterbacks, and like I said, in my era, and the quarterbacks, they say, "Oh, I'm a smart guy, no question about it." But to their advantage, they got all the technology to help. Upstairs they got, they can look down and see what's going on and tell them, instantly, and tell them what they want to see them do. And so, I have a problem, not a problem, but I wouldn't say a problem. When I see these guys saying the greatest of all time, and I'm saying, okay, did they ever see this guy play? Like for instance, every play now in the NFL, you watch the game, everybody holds.
Right.
Everybody, every play.
Mm-hmm.
Now back in that time, if your hands were even out, most of the guys had to block with their fist clenched, hands clenched in the fist, and then that would keep them from any holding call. And then and you get your head out or around, it was done. I had a lot of long runs called back because of that. So the blocking, everything about the game is exciting, that stuff, but you can't make comparisons to players of different eras. It's a different game. So I admire, and not admire, but I respect all the guys that play. Their talents and everything, but believe me, when you got big guys up there, you got cornerbacks that can get up there and bump and run you all the way downfield until the ball's left, half the guys wouldn't have half the yards they got today. So you can't make that comparison because when like a Lynn Barney or people like that getting up on you and bumping you all the way downfield, keeping you off your pattern. It's a different game. So you get more yards, you get more receptions, and I'm not saying they're not great players because they certainly are, but they're no greater than the ones that I watch play.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I always wanted to ask you this question, Chuck, and I'm glad I have this time with you to ask you. You were unbelievable. Actually, in 1975, I think you led the league in receiving, receptions for that particular year. Do you think your ability of being able to catch the ball out of the backfield as well as you did maybe hampered your chances at getting into the Football Hall of Fame because you weren't recognized maybe for what you did from the perspective of catching the ball out of the backfield as you were when you were running the ball out of the backfield?
Well, I think, first of all, I played fullback, and that was my position in the NFL. And certainly, no question about it, when they evaluate me, I mean, because there's guys in the Hall of Fame that, they belong there, but they don't have, well, how can I put it without sounding? Let's put it like this way. They haven't, there were some better. There were some good, but none better. I just did it differently. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I understand that.
And so, but when they evaluate these so-called experts, oh, he didn't do this and he didn't do that, but okay. When you talk about impact plays, changing games, scoring touchdowns, critical situations, okay, evaluate me on that. And I don't think in my era anyway, in the time that I played, there were nobody better. Maybe it's good, but none better.
Well, let me ask you this before we let you run here, because you're not the only Minnesota Viking, because I honestly think you should be, and I'm not just saying it because I've already said it. You know, you were one of my favorite running backs in the 70s while I was growing up. But there was another guy you played with that I have said for years should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's guys like Fran Tarkenton, he made it. Alan Page made it. Ahmad Rashad made it. Paul Krause, I believe was his name, made it. Should, and I want your opinion because you watched him play for many years, should Jim Marshall be in the Hall of Fame?
That's I don't know what the criteria for being in the Hall of Fame is. But you said Ahmad was in there. Ahmad's not in the Hall of Fame, not yet. Anyway, neither is Jim. So, like I said, another player, another evaluation by people we have no control over. They say this, and they say, for me, they say it's not as rushing earth, but they forget about. Like you say, from my game, the receiving and all that stuff. And then when you talk about Jim Marshall, they say he didn't do this and he didn't. But hey, the man played 20 years.
Yep.
And he was a great leader on our football team. And like I said, I don't know what their criteria for selecting Hall of Fame players. Only thing I know is that whatever it is, they need to regroup and change it, because he certainly deserves that too.
Chuck, last question. I'll let you run, buddy. What would it mean to you to get that phone call or to get that knock on the door saying you have been inducted to the Hall of Fame?
I really couldn't say. I think I let that ship sail long ago.
Right.
So, I don't know. The feelings I have about it are not the same. I got to be straight and honest with you. So, I guess it would be good, but like I said, it's not something I even give thought to anymore. Like I said, in my life anyway, I let that part of my life sail. I'm perfectly happy, perfectly satisfied with everything I've accomplished.
Yeah, and believe me, yeah, so am I. I mean, I had such great memories growing up watching you playing, and I want to thank you so very, very much taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina.
But I want to say this to you too.
Okay.
But it's people like yourself that I hear from that have the knowledge of the game, that understand what I'm talking about, what I'm feeling about this NFL thing. I hear it from you. I've heard from a lot of people, because to be quite honest with you, most people assume that I'm already in the Hall of Fame, and are shocked when I say, no, I'm not there. And then they question about, well, this guy's there, and why aren't you there? Well, I have no clue. But the only thing, like I said to you, is I appreciate the respect, the recognition that you've given me, and that, when I get off this phone today, I'll be having a big smile on my face. I'll just say, there's another person out there that knows the real deal. So,
no doubt about that, my friend. I mean, I've watched you, like I said, growing up. I admired you for many, many, many years, and I'll tell you what, you were one of my favorites. And once again, I talk to people that I watched growing up. It's funny on this show. So obviously that just tells you the impact you had on my life growing up.
Well, I appreciate that. It's really a great honor to talk to you today. And like I said, man, I'll have a smile on my face. Thanks so much.
All right, my friend. Stay safe, okay?
All right. Take it easy.
You too. All right, that was the great Chuck Foreman. Well, folks, we're out of time. Oh, baby, this show goes so quick when we have so many great, great topics and guests to talk to and about. Next week, folks, bowl week is kicking up. We're going to talk about the North Carolina football. We'll talk about Wake Forest. We'll talk about Duke. We'll talk about State. We'll talk about the Tar Heels all playing in bowl games. We'll preview those next week. Until then, have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday. Same time, same place.